Well, good morning and welcome to the ACT-IAC Networks and Telecommunications webinar with the Federal Mobility Group. I'm Kevin Gallo, the government co-chair for the Networks and Telecommunications Community of Interest, and a member of GSA's Information Technology Category team. First note, please note that today's session will be recorded. First off, I would like to introduce Mr. Alan Hill. Mr. Hill is the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Category Management in the Information Technology category for GSA's Federal Acquisition Service. The programs he manages provides the full spectrum of IT products, services, and solutions to virtually every department and agency, as well as state and local government. Last year, his office facilitated over $30 billion in government spend. Of course, an important aspect of this are the wireless and mobility solutions. GSA had led the mobile services category team, which is one of the predecessors of the Federal Mobility Group. And GSA is one of the FMG's co-chairs. Mr. Hill has personally been a very active supporter of the FMG. And within the networks and telecommunications community, we're of course very familiar with the Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions or EIS program and its predecessors. Prior to his current position, he led the Information Technology Category's Office of Telecommunications Services. He was an IT executive at the Department of Education, and his roots go back to the Air Force. With that, over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Kevin, very much. And thank you all for joining us today. I'm Alan Hill. I oversee the GSA's technology contracts. It's safe to say that the pandemic has taught those of us working in IT many lessons. One is the value of having a well-equipped mobile workforce. Wide-scale telework enables the normal operations of government and the steady delivery of services to the American people. It also enables the federal workforce to socially distance and still effectively support the agency's missions. Mobile technology is rapidly evolving and in demand. For example, 5G will help revolutionize how IT services are delivered. Not only increase network capacity, but it provides the enablement of things like edge computing. Enhance cybersecurity, such things as microsegmentation for zero trust, IoT, sensors, automation. And with these technologies, we are able to create smart infrastructures and improve citizen experiences. Even before the pandemic, many agencies were actively exploring modernization strategies to accommodate different types of wireless services. 2 years ago, we at GSA replaced our expiring FSSI wireless BPAs with an expanded program from Purchase and Mobility on the schedules. That multiple award schedule SIN has been designated best in class now. It offers up to 11 different subcategories for federally compliant, commercially available solutions grouped into 4 technology areas: wireless services, enterprise mobility management, mobility application security, and Internet of Things and other mobile services. Streamlining acquisition is certainly a key part of growing workforce readiness through the mobility. But you need to know a community of leaders who work, who can look holistically at where the technology is going and how it will work in government. That is our Federal Mobility Group here that serves our needs. They do the heavy lifting so that those of us managing IT can make informed decisions and leverage best practices. I'd like to thank the IAC Telecom Community of Interest for inviting us all here today. I'd like to commend the panelists from the Federal Mobility Group for sharing their wisdom with us. I'd like to single out Gemma and Vince from NIST and DHS for their leadership and the vibrant group that they are growing through the Federal Mobility Group. Kevin and Jim are representing the Federal Mobility Group today, but are also part of the GSA mobility program. That's not coincidence. Shout outs are also in order for Dran, Christian, Suro, Kelly, and all the other professionals across the agency supporting the Federal Mobility Group. I look forward for an interesting discussion on mobility and mission-related challenges faced by agencies. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alan. That was a great way to start us off. So let's move over to our panel session. We all know how critically important mobility is for enabling agency missions. And critically important for today's modern everyday life, for that matter. We know how important 5G is. The capabilities it's starting to usher in, and certainly what's on the horizon there. We know how important cybersecurity is. I don't need to talk any more about that. On today's panel, these are the people that are working to make it all happen on a government-wide basis. I mean, the FMG is the centerpiece of interagency collaboration on these topics. So our panelists today, we have Mr. Vincent Sritapan. He's the chief of the Cyber Quality Service Management Office in the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. He is also one of the Federal Mobility Group's co-chairs. Mr. Josh Weaver, the Telecommunications Systems Engineer with the US Navy, and he leads the FMG's 5G and Mobile Network Infrastructure Working Group. Mr. Ross Ford, Senior Engineer with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and another of the FMG members. Ms. Gemma Howell, Computer Scientist with the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and also one of the FMG's co-chairs. So one little note here for the audience, if you do have any questions, please go ahead and chat them in. So just in the chat box there, we'll see if we can take some questions throughout the panel, and certainly at the end, we'll be looking and taking questions. So I'm going to start us off first with one question here. And mobility permeates today's IT, and it's a very broad topic. We used to talk about cellular wireless services. It's so much more now. Vincent, what's the scope of your activities here, and how is the Federal Mobility Group organized?
Sure. If we could pull up, yeah, perfect. So Federal Mobility Group, just to give some folks background, you may or may not be aware of it. It's been around for about a year now, over a year now. And what I would say is that it really started, and sort of why we're here is because of what we found back in as early as 2013, 2016 timeframes. You'll see things like the Mobile Technology Tiger Team supporting the Digital Government Strategy, or the Mobile Services Category Team supporting M16-20. It was actually the same group of folks, right? Across federal government, people who own and operate mobile programs are really a part of this Federal Mobility Group. And so what we're here to do, and what we look at, is it's across the federal government, right? Pretty much every part, where we look at common challenges in mobility. We look at working on solutions, and when we can share best practices, right? What we find today is a lot of opportunity there across government. And so for our efforts, we do have this as a community of practice listed under the FedCIO Council, chartered there. We actually do not, and sort of our focus is non-national security and mission and mobility missions. Our executive sponsor is Mr. Nick Ward from Department of Justice. The things I'll note is that we meet the first and third Tuesday. It is for government specifically, right? So if anybody's in the federal government interested to join, we have about 200 plus members, 45 departments and agencies meeting the first and third Tuesday of every month. You can email at us. It's a group effort at wireless@gsa.gov. So definitely, feel free to reach out and learn more. But as far as if you want to go to the next slide real quick. So how we're structured and what we're looking to do as we look at mobility and how it permeates today's IT as a very broad topic, we try to cover this under 4 strategic pillars. One is mobile security, another is mobile acquisition, the third is 5G and mobile network infrastructure, and the 5th being mission enablement. And you can see there's leads from Department of Interior or NASA SUP, DoD in this case, and USAID and others, right? And so across the federal government, you'll see us working on things like the FSMA mobile metrics, the DRIVE PIV credentials. You'll hear us talk about that. You'll hear us look at different parts of acquisition, integrated data collection, and different 5G efforts for collaboration testing, and mission enablement can be a variety of ways in which we engage with industry, right? There may be industry folks on this call. Opportunities to engage with them really are listed here for, if you're trying to show us any kind of new emerging technology, you name it, we want to know, we have that opportunity to engage. But that's pretty much how we focus our areas, and going forward, we break out into different working groups and different deliverables, which you'll hear us talk about next. Okay.
Oh my gosh, if you look at that slide, you are touching almost everything. All these, very, very wide aspect of mobility. And I've seen the list of deliverables that you've posted to OMB Max there, and it's somewhat voluminous too. And some of those documents have a wealth of info. So today what I'd like to do is just focus on a couple of the areas of particular interest. So talk a little bit about 5G and also about mobile security. So a question for you, Josh, since you're leading the 5G group there, is can you describe a few of the 5G use cases and activities that are going on in government right now? And Josh, there you on. Got your audio working? There we go.
Sorry about that.
We've all been there.
Got my video on, but not the audio. Okay. So I'll start with what the FMG has done, and then because that's how we pulled some of the use cases out of the federal government. So since the 5G group started a little bit a year ago, as Vincent said, we've done a couple of white papers that you alluded to that we've posted on OMB Max. The first two were FOUO, so it's government only, but we did a policy analysis that kind of went over a lot of the applicable policies that would impact the expeditious rollout of 5G infrastructure in the United States, and kind of really synthesize those and put them all into one document so that decision makers could make sense of it all. Then for the second document, we toured the country, about 19 different 5G labs, anything from federally owned to commercials to commercial entities to OEM, carrier grade, and academic labs, and kind of assembled a document that outlined their capabilities and made some recommendations as to particular use cases they might be good to approach for testing. And then finally, most recently, we published publicly a document that kind of built upon both of those and was a framework to conduct 5G testing. And in there, we describe a couple of use cases. So I know that within the DoD, if you've been reading the news, right, they announced 4 initial sites and then finally a 5th to test out use cases such as smart warehousing. So using 5G to enhance logistics and product security and accountability and those kinds of technologies. Which have dual use. So it helps the military, gives us additional capabilities, helps us do our job better, faster, cheaper, but also can be turned around and used in commercial type warehouses. So that was done at 2 sites. We're also looking into augmented reality and virtual reality to enhance training. And that's being done with the Army. So imagine putting on a headset and kind of like a video game, you're producing targets and information to the warfighters as they move about in their training scenarios and create a realistic training scenario. And then finally, they're looking at the 4th site, dynamic spectrum sharing. So as you may imagine, with the increased demands for 5G services and ubiquitous connectivity of everything, we need spectrum resources to connect that all, and that's a very finite resource. The DoD happens to have a lot of it in what we call beachfront spectrum, where it's got the right properties from a physics perspective to balance propagation distance and penetration in the building. So they're looking at sharing that in a bidirectional way, so that when the DoD is not using it or when the commercial entity is not using it, the other party can use that spectrum. So really interesting stuff to pop out there. And then the 5th location was out at Nellis Air Force Base, where they're looking at mobile 5G networks that could pop up a truck and rapidly create a 5G network on the move. Over.
All right. That is a lot of items that you're working on right now. And in that one document, which I know is publicly posted, in fact, we sent out, it was one of the ACT-IAC email notices. We highlighted that. So with that, and talking about some of those 5G use cases, so this is a question for any of the panelists. So beyond that, how's the FMG assisting the government with the implementation of 5G?
Yeah, so I'll try to take this a little bit. So one of the things that we do, this is Vincent here, is so with the paperwork, we had a white paper. It's a framework to conduct 5G testing. It's really there to help agencies and departments and agencies really think through what they're looking to test, understanding that 5G, it's great, it has a lot of opportunity, but it's more than just hype, right? It's biggest concern for us originally, to be upfront, is that folks, some agencies and others were just doing 5G because it's a new buzzword, right? And so when you think about the use cases, you think about actually how we apply the technology and understanding what's there to the standards that are out there, the different rollout and deployment, understanding when things are going to come online from non-standalone to standalone type of capabilities. That really is what we have in this actually work product. So one doing to assist government in implementing that, we have a partnership with NIDRD. It's actually under Office of Science Technology Policy. It's a group called the Advanced Wireless Test Platform Group that exists. And so we're actually looking to leverage things like the framework to conduct 5G testing to help collaboration and testing of 5G, right, going forward. And so, what I would say to that is, our hope is to do a virtual event sometime in the April, late spring timeframe, just a note. And what we do within government today is actually look at the actual, opportunities for education, right, within 5G. So understanding what's there, right, everything from enhanced mobile broadband to ultra reliable low latency communications, massive machine type communications, all the different use cases that you can apply in this space. We've partnered with different carriers, OEMs, chipset manufacturers, and even other small business, big business, academia, to come and bring in different educational series, and not to call out any direct names, but it's been really opportunistic, right, to understand what's out there today, what's real, what's not. And what we do is we bring both the Federal Mobility Group members to really learn from industry and share, what are they looking for, different use cases. And additionally, as we look at this, we also are looking at, on our case, what does the government need and what are they looking to buy, right? And so the piece with acquisitions, as you see here on the slide, I don't know if that's still showing, the piece we have with the group is, understanding what we're looking and how we look to buy that. And so I would say there's a lot of internal papers that we have and also external, but the key thing is whatever you're looking to test, right? We hope that you do test in 5G, and the piece for this is because we want to accelerate adoption of 5G. So the more we can test, the more we can actually get it ready and hopefully adopt, right? And that key piece is, whoever gets the 5G first, hopefully has that economic, advantage and economic benefit from it. So I'll just mention that and stop there.
Yeah, I'll add to that, if you don't mind, that we also do just information sharing amongst government members. So who's doing what in 5G, what kind of activities they have going on, where are they spending their money, in the hopes that we can, reduce duplicative efforts and amplify, and synergize across the various agencies and really just learn from each other on how we do this and get further faster. Over.
Yes, I've seen a number of or several of the briefings, the presentations you've had, and a lot of those, and it is a wealth, probably the best one single source I have seen of various capability briefings and examples of where industry has provided some 5G solution there, and also what's coming on the horizon. So quite a bit. I do. There's one follow-up question that about these is, Josh, you had commented or spoken about the DoD spectrum sharing there, and then one of the items there. Could you provide any overview of the comments that you've received around that? Do you have that available?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to speak on that today, but we did receive a lot of comments on those. So we very much appreciate the comments that were received, but yeah, I'm not prepared to comment on that today.
Okay, that's probably coming in the future then. So I'm going to go ahead and shift here a little bit. We've talked a little bit about 5G, so I want to talk a bit about mobile security. Ross, this is probably a good question for you. What are some of the mobile security challenges and initiatives that are being worked on by the FMG and in government right now?
Well, thanks a lot, Kevin. That's a great question. And look, I want to thank ACT-IAC for allowing us to come here to speak today. And I want to also thank the leadership for doing such a great job in shepherding this important area. I'd like to talk about mobile security, and let me first put it in a little context. There are initiatives in the federal government that are around security of systems, and the mobile community fits into that. So I'll talk first about some of the way we address mobile challenges by talking about how this first, the FISMA mobility metrics fits into just the general FISMA metrics first, right? So those who may not be really aware about the FISMA CIO metrics, each year the CIO Council publishes a set of metrics they ask agencies to report on. And those metrics align with the cybersecurity framework. The cybersecurity framework classifies systems in terms of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So devices on the network and the categorization of risk of systems and their risk on the network is part of the identify. and last year we had added mobility metrics around devices. So you're asking agencies to report to in the FISMA metrics about the mobile device management or enterprise mobile management systems that they have, and how those devices help interact with mobile devices on the network, both for government furnished equipment and for BYOD devices. And in the protect realm for the cybersecurity framework, we ask about users, and we ask about operating systems, and those questions are being asked for the mobile arena as well in this year. So not only do you need to look at all your devices that an agency manages, but the mobile devices in particular we're asking questions about this year. And then going forward, we're asking about, and I'll take a look to the next topic here, the derived PIV. That's another part of the FISMA metrics. It's also one of the working groups that we have under the FMG. So the FMG has both this FISMA mobility metrics and the derived PIV credentials working group. And that derived PIV credentials working group has been looking at derived PIV credentials, which have traditionally been X509 certificates that are similar to the ones that are on your PIV card, but they can work on mobile devices. And now going forward, mobile devices offer a lot of additional sensors and capabilities. So we'll be looking at other authenticators on the mobile devices too, helping agencies determine which other authenticators would be appropriate for them to use. And in all cases, being able to use the identity verification that employees and contractors have already done just to become an employee or a contractor, and use that PIV, we call it the PIV identity verification, as part of the binding of these authenticators to the user. So we are ensuring that who is on the network and on the mobile network is who we know they are. And those are the initiatives that we're trying to help champion through, with the mobile security working groups.
Okay, thanks, Ross. I do see some of the questions being chatted in here. One about the slides. So yes, we're going to say we'll share the slides later, so you don't have to frantically copy down all the information that's on this one. So we were talking a little bit about the derived PIV there and what you're doing with that. So have you seen any changes, for impact due to COVID when it comes to mobile security and like modernizing credentials management?
Yeah, there's been a lot of impact. I'll just say first, I mentioned the PIV card itself, and what agencies have found is that many agencies, the PIV card requires in-person verification. So for new hires or for people that need to get their PIV card updated, and they, the intention would be them to go in person to a facility where they can do those actions, including, getting fingerprints taken and that kind of stuff. That many agencies don't have facilities that can operate in that way during this period of COVID. And so agencies have had to take an innovative approach to enabling people on the network when they couldn't fully comply with all those PIV in-person requirements. My agency in particular, I can talk about, we issued a directive where we could do a derived alternate credential, and it operates technically like a PIV credential on the network, but it doesn't have the in-person verification, and so we limit what people can do with that. For instance, they can't get access to PII, and they can't get on facilities that won't let you do that. If you need to do those activities, you need to find a way to go get the full verification, in-person verification. And then agencies across the board have had to react, and they've taken a risk-based approach, right? So part of what OMB and CISA, my agency, recognized is they needed to help agencies continue to do operations in this unusual time. And so they've given guidance to take a risk managed approach, to do what they need to do to continue operations, even when they couldn't meet some of these really high bars because the situation we are operating in.
Okay, thank you. So, regarding mobile security and the challenges and initiatives being worked by the FMG, are there things that other panelists want to add about that?
Yeah, this is Vincent. So I just wanted to note, and going back to FSMA real quick for folks, right? And so historically, and I say, before FY18, from a metrics perspective, that mobile really wasn't accounted for if you actually look at the metrics. And what I would say in FY18 and going on before, we did add sort of the core, it's a bare minimum of things like, well, what percentage of your devices are managed by an MDM or EMM solution, right? As we move today, though, and we have other things like, do you have an allow or deny list for applications, some kind of process or policy in place, and how is that managed? But as we move forward today, and what you're seeing probably in FY21 FSMA mobile metrics is things like mobile threat defense, right? So the piece of, just like any kind of endpoint protection that you would have on an asset, we got past, and we're hopefully getting past the hardware, software asset management, right? Knowing what we have. Now, when we think about, the configuration piece, policy enforcement can be done at the MDM. We are looking at endpoint protection. So I will tell you in the process that we've gone through, so our group, working folks like with Ross and Dave Harris from Department of Interior leads this effort, actually works, getting input from industry, but actually working across government to handle this, right? And so things like mobile threat defense is, I believe, going to be a non-scored metric this year. We move forward, and you'll see, like, we do the crawl, walk, run, right? In the sense of, we try to present a new metric. It's usually non-scored. It doesn't have a huge impact. But then after it's been vetted and been, it becomes a scored metric and can be used, hopefully you're accountable for that. But a lot of things that we put in, honestly, are, it's understanding of threat, but it's also common sense, right? And, there's certain basic things you need to do within mobile security that we've pushed for. So I can tell you, based on a variety of our efforts across the board, CISA included and others, you can think of things like, EMM, MDM is critical. Your identity piece is critical. mobile threat defense is critical, and then last one being mobile application vetting, right? Those real, 3-4 pieces are the cornerstones of how we do enterprise mobile security, for the federal government, for other places across the board. It's just the best practice. So I'll just note that there. Note that really appreciate folks like Ross, Dave Harris, and others stepping up to support the groups across federal government as a whole. But we see common challenges. We take a common approach to a lot of these things. Over.
Okay, thanks. I see we got some other questions being chatted in here, and so I'll just open this up for the panel here. But when we talk about wireless technologies, we've talked about 5G. Does the FMG also including 4G, LTE, and how about like Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6? And what device types are included in the mobility group portfolio? Is it just your handheld devices, or is it broader than that?
So okay, Josh, you want to cover it? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll just say that in our group, we're concentrated primarily on the 5G side of it, but a lot of those networks, to your point, are heterogeneous. And when you look at it from a use case perspective, some of those don't necessarily care what your backend network is. So while we are concentrating on 5G, a lot of those use cases do kind of migrate between 5G and LTE and or Wi-Fi. So we do touch on all of those, but we're primarily focused on the 5G side of things.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add or note is that there is a variety, because our stakeholder base is much across federal government as a whole. All of those, 4G, LTE, Wi-Fi 6, 5G, all of that actually is in play and applicable. It just depends on whether it propagates up. I can tell you as an example, and you can see this just because, we're CISA in this case, and I'm speaking on behalf of CISA, and with a partnership with DHS S&T, you probably saw the press release just yesterday that announced the 7 awards in the Secure, Resilient, and Mobile Network Infrastructure BAA, right? So, agency by agency has their own responsibility, just like with Josh and the DoD, OUSD, R&E side, the 5G to XG program has their efforts, right? And when there's commonalities, we bring that forward. But the truth is, we do have projects that look at 4G, LTE, 5G security, you name it. We even have a SIBR it's already been announced. It's been reviewed for proposals and all that. The awardees haven't been announced, but there's a Wi-Fi 6 and 5G convergence topic. We're looking at security and interoperability under a small business innovation research, right? So these topics are applicable. We do care. It just depends on sort of what vantage point you're looking at. And I can tell you that, as we find commonalities, we bring that up to the group, and it's sort of both a bottom up and top down approach that we use. And it really depends on, who's willing to put what resources forward to work on that common challenge. But definitely with Josh's effort in that pillar and the working groups, it is focused on 5G. If you look at it from a funding perspective, honestly, 5G research and development is where all the money's at, right? So just note, need to throw at something, then yeah, we'll probably work on that more than if you don't, right? So yeah.
And then as a follow-up to that, the next question was on devices. So with 4G LTE, the primary use case was smartphones, right? That's what enabled your Ubers and your Netflix on the go and all those kinds of technologies. And the promise of 5G is that ubiquitous connectivity of everything. And that's where all the R&D that Vincent just alluded to is kind of starting to look into. So where else can we use this kind of wireless technology? Anywhere from the augmented reality, virtual reality to unmanned aerial systems, unmanned sea systems, and just being able to connect all the things, IoT sensors, and that's where the research is how do we figure out how to best utilize that, how to secure it, and then how to use that to enhance the government's mission. Over.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that? Also, another question coming in, and you talked a bit about FSMA metrics there on the mobility ones, and I assume that's broader than just 5G. That's regardless of the technology. But I know that your FMG collects more metrics and is involved with more than just the security and the FSMA metrics. So, what are some of the other metrics and data that you collect and use?
Are we allowed to talk about? Okay, so we'll see if I get in trouble or not. But so we do have integrated data collection metrics. This is more on the CAO side, Chief Acquisition Office type of side of the house. But when you think about like the spend, and I know, folks from GSA probably know this better, or NASA Soup and others on the acquisition side, but we do collect that. I will say I have to understand the context of what's public or not public in this sense for this one, but there is metrics around, like device inventory, right? It's a different vantage point. It's different than FSMA would traditionally be based off of like, management of devices and understanding your inventory. When we talk about IDC, it's actually looking at your contract vehicles and looking at how many devices you purchase. So an easy example of the difference could be something like FEMA, right? Knowing your inventory, when you talk about what's in production and what's managed, right? That's going to be a certain number. But when you talk about surge capacity and, some the winter advisory, whatever hit recently, there may be a surge of folks and they may have an inventory that they purchased, but they didn't manage before, but now those come online. And so those numbers fluctuate, right? As far as the percentage of managed, and it rightly so. So in our efforts with, OFPP and others working with the IT category manager for GSA and others, you will see that IDC itself is there. It's not our responsibility to collect it, just to be clear, that's through that process. But our group helps in coordinating some of those efforts and actually looks at that data, right? And so what I will say is understanding the inventory, the spend, all those different pieces of it, as far as like wireless priority services, I know is in there. So what's the, in the event something happens, especially COVID and all that, emergency preparedness is a big piece. You also look at, the adoption of 5G and those types of things. So we've tried to streamline that and support those efforts going forward. But note that IDC has its requirements for that. That data, I don't believe, is made available. It's usually for internal leadership decisions on, okay, well, what are we purchasing? Why do we purchase? And historically, I can tell you, and you can go back to the days of when mobile services category team was around. You could see things where the cost per device per month, dropped significantly, right, over a duration. And so those types of things are why we care about those types of metrics. Over.
Okay. Well, thanks. So again, if there are in the audience, if there's additional questions, please go ahead and chat those in. We're doing okay here on time. I do have one other question here I wanted to ask. So yeah, and this is again for any of the panelists, is, can you talk a bit about the national strategy to secure 5G and the implementation plans?
You want to start, Josh, or you want me to do it? Sorry.
Why don't you take a stab at it?
So national strategy to secure 5G, and if you remember folks like Dr. Eric Berger and others from OSTP, a big driver behind a lot of these efforts, and others from on high. This was something that was pushed. You'll see a lot of cross-government efforts and agencies participating. Any of the 1.1 activities you'll see there, honestly, were research and development. All the other pieces deal with policy, industry engagement, economic incentives, the whole 9 yards. And you can go look it up. I will say that from CISA's perspective, right, and I'll cover that first, and then I'll also cover Federal Mobility Group, is that CISA does have a 5G strategy, right? So you can look up CISA's 5G strategy, go to cisa.gov/5G. I actually helped lead the CISA 5G R&D efforts. That's how I know about the BAA and all the other pieces. And so there's a lot of efforts there that look to promote, the risks and the adoption rollout of 5G for the US and the government, really because we want to have that economic advantage when you talk about the applications. It's not 5G itself by alone is just a medium for transport, right? But it's all the applications that on top of it, right? So if you think about it in sort of a parody of if before Google comes out, or before some kind of a what is it, Uber or whatever the app is that's going to make it, the greatest hot new thing. You can think of whatever it's telemedicine or, smart warehouse, AR, VR for whatever piece that's the application on top of 5G is what we really want to get at, right? And so that national strategy itself is there. There is the implementation plan that came out. So you can see folks like Department of Commerce, NTIA, NIST, you name it, State Department, all these different folks have different roles and responsibilities in them. What I will tell you is our efforts within Federal Mobility Group and sort of what we looked at in activities 1.1 areas is supporting the collaboration of testing of 5G efforts, right? There's other parts that are economic incentives, but I will say, who's who in the zoo is very complex, right? And even before the out, we were looking at a lot of those efforts and just trying to help connect the dots, right? And so, and I think maybe Josh can talk more about this. I'll turn it over to you. And where we've done strategy sessions to try to connect folks, because in truth, a lot of folks didn't know who's doing what, right? And I think the strategy, our original efforts actually were provided up through that NSC and others to share like who's doing what, right? If you're doing X, you should probably talk to this other person, and when we folks together. But I guess, Josh, do you want to talk about that? I don't want to.
Yeah, I'll just mention or re-mention, since we brought it up briefly before, but we stand ready to help support that implementation plan. As the plans to do that kind of firm up, and we're also working with groups like the Advanced Wireless Test Platform group out of NIDRD to take some of the products that we've already done and leverage a lot of the work we've already done, connecting some of those dots, as Vincent said, building up the relationship with folks in the industry that are building things and deploying networks, the folks in the academic labs that are trying to discover what that next best thing is, the emerging technology piece, as well as who in the government is doing research and deploying technologies, so that we can kind of put all those pieces together and allow people to move out a little bit more expeditiously by leveraging work that's already been done. And then our work with the Advanced Wireless Test Platform is really to almost take all that work for a test drive and kind of peel through some use cases and see where there's gaps and what work needs to be done to further those kinds of products. So to that end, we're looking to advance the testing of that by helping people to connect the dots, because we've but before COVID we traveled around and started putting all those documents together, or those connections together into documents. So willing and able to do more of that as these pandemic restrictions lift, and however we can fit in to serve the execution of that implementation plan. We're standing by and ready. Over.
Okay. Well, thank you. There is another question I wanted to ask. Now, you've touched on this a little bit, and with all the work that you're doing, in particular in the 5G space and mobile security, where are the opportunities for industry to engage with government in these areas?
So traditionally, I will mention that we always go back to the wireless@gsa.gov for the sort of the formal method to connect, right? That's how we actually do that. We also are looking to put together, as I mentioned, with the NIDRD AWTP folks, right? Advanced Wireless Test Platform. We look to host a virtual event. Again, it's different just due to the COVID restrictions in the environment. But I will say that, if it wasn't for that, we'd probably do it in person, right? But doing a virtual event that we look to host in the spring timeframe, we want to include both government, academia, and industry, right? We really thought about this through, because we wanted to connect, folks with the actual use cases and initiatives with folks that actually have the capability, right? Whether that's a industry partner or whether that's a national laboratory or you name it, right? And what I can say is that a lot of our efforts are driving to connect the folks. A lot of it I know has been government only, internal. And I would say, we have had quite a variety of carriers, OEMs, small business, big business, even universities come and brief the group on different topic areas, right? So it's been a lot of education first. But as far as, if you're trying to sell something, we do have a mechanism for that. That's why the mission enablement pillar is in place. But again, it's still through the wireless at gsa.gov is your initial point. So.
And I'd like to add that in the derived PIV credential working group, we engage through the agencies that are doing deployments of derived PIV credentials. They always have some industry provider that's providing the services for that, right? Whether that's whether it's a certification authority and an issuing system, or maybe a provider that provides TOTP or one of these new style credentials or a hard token. There's always industry partners that participate on that. We do go through the agencies because we find the best value to our other agencies, as we're trying to describe the best approaches, is the agencies bring in what they're doing and we share that information with other agencies. They get the benefit of the work that somebody's already done, right? But it's extremely important to have the commercial providers also there, because they're the ones that have built the tools that these agencies are using.
Okay, thanks. And well, we actually have a number of questions come in, and I just got to pick one because we haven't, we delved down a little bit more technical here. So here's the question. How do you see overcoming the propagation distance limitation of millimeter wave frequencies to obtain the required bandwidth over greater distances?
That's a good question. Somebody paid attention in physics. As you know, millimeter waves don't traditionally propagate very far, but there's different technologies that have emerged that you can take advantage of, such as beamforming, and then operating if you're at high altitudes or low altitudes. I mean, the physics changed, and that's really where the R&D space is to figure out which technologies work best to get that balance of propagation distance versus speeds. And I mean, as you're alluding to, I mean, that's the whole point of small cells, right? With 5G, is you can use those higher frequencies because you've got a smaller, more dense population of base stations. So you can kind of overcome the limitations in a sense just by having more base stations. But at the same time, the 3GPP spec mandates beamforming bidirectionally, so both from the base station to the handheld and also from the handheld to the base station. And you can get, from what I've heard, higher distances than were initially anticipated by doing so. Over.
Okay, well, thank you. All right. For the next segment here, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Gemma Howell. And so Gemma, if you could talk a little bit about, what does the mobile landscape look like for the future? Where's the FMG headed, this upcoming fiscal year and next?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. And thanks for having me here today at this event. This is great. Always a great discussion hearing about the work that's coming onto the FMG. The mobile landscape of the future, it's forever changing, right? It's always growing with the ability to connect to different endpoints and gather and process and send useful information that help our various government agencies achieve their mission. I want to note that, having a mobile device has gone far beyond checking our email with our phones. And so we have even these, we've talked a lot about 5G, and, in the future we'll be able to connect to, or even now we're connecting to IoT sensors and being able to review and capture information from our phones. And so keeping that in mind, there's always these different challenges, whether that be just deployments of the mobile device or even how to capture that information, or other challenges that folks may experience. And that kind of goes along with the FMG's charter. We are chartered to address the mobile challenges that the different agencies may experience. In some cases, we may help develop some working solutions, or even just share the best practices around how to best address some of the challenges that are out there. So So for the FMG this fiscal year, we plan to continue along our charter to identify those challenges, meet with industry, to understand the latest technology that may be out there. We talked about that a little bit earlier, as well as maybe some of the various threats and vulnerabilities that are coming up, and maybe what some of the vendors are doing to address those vulnerabilities and how we could incorporate that into our environment. So FMG is always moving forward, staying on top of the latest incidents and technologies. Even now, as we talked a little bit about 5G and discussions around maybe even some supply chain issues that may come up. So different things like that. And I guess to be a little bit more specific, what the panelists talked about today covered a lot of what we have going on, preparing and progressing to adapt to the 5G infrastructure, adopting new authenticator mechanisms that are appropriate for specific use cases, updating those FSMA metrics, making sure that they include the mobile metrics and to stay up with the latest technologies, making sure we have things like the mobile threat defense technologies and mobile application vetting tools included in those metrics. So I think that covers the high level, but I'll get to these specific deliverables that we have here on the slide. So as it says, we've set a high bar for our 2021 deliverables. At the top there, you'll see the FY21 Beyond FSMA Mobility Metrics Report. That's focused on advancing the metrics. I talked a little bit about that just now. There was a little bit of discussion around the IDC mobility data reporting and analysis, where we kind of analyze IDC metrics to see how they may impact decision making. Then we also have a group under the mission enablement who's working on the international travel guidance for mobile devices. And then under our mobile security pillar, we are also developing a mobile security ecosystem paper. And then lastly there, we have the situational awareness report on 5G health effects, just kind of gathering information about, what folks are saying about 5G and the potential impact on individuals' health. And I guess with that, I want to end on, we'd love to have you join us. Our group meets bi-weekly. And we discuss various topics. It does require an active gov or .mil address. And I know you've heard it multiple times, but wireless@gsa.gov is how you join the team. So we look forward to having you, and I'll turn it back to you, Kevin. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Gemma. And thank you very much for all of the panelists here. I mean, wealth of information. So thank you for appearing on today's webinar, but also, thank you for your efforts on the FMG. I mean, it really is impressive, the volume and impact of activities that you're leading. So just right here, we see an announcement here for some upcoming events that the Networks and Telecommunications COI is doing in coordination with the Federal Insight Exchange. And so we got April 8th, talk about GSA's Alliant 2, looking ahead. And then on April 19th, one about Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions program. So that's our webinar. Also do want to just thank Nancy Delanoche from ACT-IAC for helping coordinate this, and a big thanks to Kelly Adams supporting GSA and the Federal Mobility Group for the wealth of planning efforts that you put into this. So thank you, and thank everyone else very much for listening in. And for those of you who are interested, I'd like to talk a little bit about the NNT COI. So we'll just have a quick little NNT meeting here. So the Networks and Telecommunications community of interest, the mission, the purpose here, as the name implies, and as ACT-IAC's mission is, we provide clear, impartial feedback, recommendations on NNT issues, and technologies, network and telecommunications technologies, NNT applications. We also highlight how NNT underpins broader IT and mission enablement. So in addition to hosting events like these, there's also 2 active projects underway right now in the community of interest. There's one around network modernization there, and on network modernization roadmap and various use cases associated with that roadmap. So that's one of the projects. In the past, we had done there's a project on 5G in particular. So we got the network modernization roadmap, and also a very active group on IPv6. So some activities related to IPv6 and plugged into some of the government-wide IPv6 activities there. So just flip over to the next slide here. And this shows the NNT leadership team. Tom Cuneo, he's my industry counterpart there, the industry chair. So if you are interested in joining the COI, if you're an ACT-IAC member, you can go to the website to join the COI. And also if you're an ACT-IAC member, and if you're interested in joining our Tuesday afternoon meetings, we have pretty regular Tuesday meetings, or interested in being on the leadership team, you can email me or Tom, and our email addresses are available on the website. And as you can see from the leadership team, a good number of people with wealth of experience here. We have 1 vacancy also for a communications chair. So I'm also seeing the chat in here for joining the COI, so you can send an email to Nancy on that. So with that, that's what we have for today. Again, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you, Alan Hill, for our opening presentation. Thanks, Nancy and Kelly, and we'll be following up with the slides. So have a good day.